going on our 20th year anniversary, and we're looking for 10,000 members, okay? 10,000 new members. And for as minimum as $10, you can join, okay? So if anybody wants to pick up one of these and write a check or whatever for the National Black Arts Festival, please do that as well. With all that said, I want to introduce Ms. Francine Henderson, who's over the library system here, is going to do our welcoming and talk about all the good program for the rest of the day. Thank you.
I want to welcome everyone. This is a fantastic turnout. And I want to, at this time, relinquish anything I wanted to say, because as you know a lot about this place, and if you don't, I can tell you later. I want to get the show on the road. Amen. I want to get the show on the road, and so right now I'm going to introduce you to Gloria Wade Gales. Her bio is in the little booklets. She said don't say anything, so I won't do that either. But we're going to get started right here and right now. So Dr. Gales, here we go.
Would Mignon Lewis go to the stage, please?
My name is Mignon Lewis, and I had the honor and the privilege of being with the very first Spelman Scholars under the leadership and the founder, Dr. Gloria Wade Gales. It was a real pleasure for me to be a part of that, connecting and bonding with the young people. I learned so much more from them than I think they learned from me, but it was still a pleasure to be with them. There were other women. I think there were 22 of us in part 1 and 2. If they are present today, would they stand? The women who were in the part, I think it began in 202. If not, I represent them all. And for the ladies who are going to be the future women of wisdom, would you stand? I believe Dr. Gales has already selected those who are going to be the future ones. Well, I guess they were stuck on the freeway that I was stuck on I-20. I barely got here, and I'm very happy that I made it. But it was a real pleasure. And for the ladies that are the women of wisdom today, it's a pleasure to know you. One of the most interesting things that I found, there were 2 women who were 20 years my senior. So I not only learned from the real women of wisdom, but I also learned from the young students. Thank you very much.
Extraordinary and remarkable African-American women of wisdom, whom we honor today. Resilient, persistent, courageous, elegant, defiant, gracious, smart, and daring. Women, we love them. Love them.
I can't stop loving you. I've made up my mind.
We can't stop loving them and thanking them for a journey through 9 decades of memories that take us to different states in the South.
Alabama, Tennessee,
Texas,
Louisiana, Kentucky,
Florida,
Mississippi,
constellation of wisdom and love.
For us, there should be no darkness because of their light.
We are because they are.
We achieve because they achieve.
We walk sure-footed and with purpose, knowing where we must go and what we must do when we get there, because
These women, each of them, furrowed paths that take us to empowered womanhood.
each of them,
Each of
in
them,
quiet and
in
yet
quiet and
revolutionary
yet revolutionary
made
ways,
possible for us a world different from the one in which they were born.
I was born by a river in a little tent. Oh,
Their memories take us to a time before now, in which we were birthed for
a time
today.
before now in which we were birthed for today.
they remember the 20s.
They remember the 30s and the Great Depression. They also remember the war that followed the Great Depression.
And they remember the movement
Ain't
of the
gonna let
60s.
nobody turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. Gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up the freedom way.
With these remarkable women,
Remarkable.
we journey from our world of George Foreman grills to their world of sturdy, strong, cast iron skillets.
From our world of superhighways to their world of sidewalks that led from home to school to church to neighbors to the grocer.
From our world of a million toys at Toys R Us to their world of homemade toys.
From our world of magnet schools to which we are bused.
The better to be smart.
To their world of community schools where being smart was a requirement and a prophecy.
From our world of mega churches reachable only by a car on a 30-minute drive on an expressway of 7 lanes. To their world of neighborhood churches.
They made of their clapping hands an instrument of joy.
Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray.
At every sight of memory, we hear them sing.
Children's rhymes.
You put your right hand in, you put your right hand out, you put your right hand in, and you shake it all about. Church songs.
Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Secular songs.
Love songs.
Unforgettable. That's what you are. Unforgettable. How near, how far. That's why, darling, it's incredible to think that someone
We
so
marvel
unforgettable
at their grace.
thinks that I am.
We understand their strength.
Too.
And we celebrate their gift.
Their memories are our treasure.
Their dignity is the mirror without cracks or streaks in which we see ourselves whole.
There are no mirrors in my nana's house, no mirrors in my nana's There are no mirrors in my Nana's house, no mirrors in my Nana's house. And the beauty that I saw in everything, the beauty in everything, oh, was in their eyes, oh, was in their eyes.
What do they want in exchange for this priceless gift? Only this.
That we believe in education,
That we believe in service.
that we embrace family and faith, truth and justice.
And that we pass on to future generations the beauty and dignity of who we are and who they must become.
We love,
We love
these
these
remarkable
remarkable
women.
women. We love them.
We love
We
them.
love them.
We love them.
We genuflect to their beauty, to their wisdom.
Like all the women who came before us, our mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers and great-great-grandmothers, they baptize us in the river of dignity and achievement.
Their memories are our treasure. Their lives, our inspiration.
Their memories are our treasure. Their lives, our inspiration.
Their memories are our treasure. Their lives, our inspiration.
And the beauty that I saw in everything, the beauty in everything, oh, was in their eyes. Oh, was in their eyes.
Women of wisdom, we salute you.
Good evening. My name is Crescent Mason, and I graduated from Spelman in 2005. I was a member of CIS.
Good evening. My name is Cindy Evans, also a graduate of Spelman 2005, a member of CIS as well.
Good evening. My name is Ebony Carter, and I am with graduating class 2006 at Clark Atlanta University, and I was also a part of CIS 2004-2005 year.
It is our pleasure to share with you very brief excerpts from the narratives in the book we are celebrating today. Their memories, our treasure, Conversations with African American Women of Wisdom, volumes 3 and 4.
The narratives are gifts we receive from the women of wisdom who mentored us three and our sisters in Spelman's Independent Scholars during the academic year 2003-2004 and 2004-2005. They were created from interviews that, when transcribed, exceeded, in some instance, 50 pages.
For reasons of time, and because we want to give you plenty of time to ease, we ask that you wait for your applause to the end of the session. Thank you. Sorry. Women of wisdom, just sit back, relax, and enjoy the gift that we all are giving to you in reciprocation of the gift that you gave to us. Thank you.
From the narrative of Mrs. Georgia Allen. My mother was a maid, and one of the best. Back then, my mother had to be a maid because she could not get an education. My grandfather, realizing that that was all she could do, sent her to the capital to a school called Eliza D. Industrial Home for Young Ladies, where girls were taught to be good servants. My mother was an excellent maid, and she was a fabulous cook. She was absolutely great at what she did. She was given to understand, like Grandpa back home, that whatever you do to make a living, you should be proud of. You do it well, and she did. As old folks say, she wouldn't take tea for the fever. Mrs. Georgia W. Allen.
For me, the preference is our traditional name, Saltwater Geechee, because we like saltwater fish. Geechees who like fresh fish water call themselves Freshwater Geechee. So if you want to know what I want you Spelman students to call us, I will tell you Saltwater Geechee. Mrs. Cornelia Bailey.
From the narrative of Mrs. Leela Barfield. My father nicknamed all the girls in the family. He nicknamed my sister Sarah Honey Love. He nicknamed my sister Alice Sweet Thing. He nicknamed my sister Eugenia Skeeter because she was always so skinny. He nicknamed me Butch because he said that's what I was when I was a little thing. We said when I would say, butcher, 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 butcher. Mrs. Leela Barfield.
From the narrative of Mrs. Julia Bond. My grandfather was the son born to my great-grandfather and a slave woman. My grandmother was black. She was a slave. My grandfather was biracial. My grandfather inherited his father's florist business. He had a large establishment of 11 greenhouses. There's a big picture of it in the basement. So yes, my grandfather's father was white, but that was true of most people in that generation. Mrs. Julia Bond.
From the narrative of Mrs. Faye W. Bush. I would go to the field and ask my father if I could plow for him. I did that when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I would try to plow because I felt sorry for him trying to work, him being sick. My father was a sharecropper all his life. It wasn't easy being a sharecropper because you would have to give a certain part of the crop that you made to the landowner. He owned the land and also owned the house you lived in. It was hard being a sharecropper. Mrs. Faye W. Bush.
From the narrative of Dr. June Dobbs Butts. When I was born, my oldest sister Renee was 20 years old at the time, and she was spending college at the Middlebury College in Vermont. And she sent a telegram home because I was 2 weeks old already and didn't have a name. Because I was born in June, she said, why not name her June? That's how I got my name. I used to tell her, thank God I wasn't born in February. Dr. June Dobbs Butts.
From the narrative of Mrs. Ann Cooper. Let me try to put this story together for you. Aunt Joyce's father was one of the old master's children, and when he grew up, he became the master's valet. The old master was fond of him. When he had 12 beautiful children, he told the old master that he wanted to leave the plantation so that his children could go to school and be able to get jobs. Old master gave him $500 and freedom. Aunt Joyce's father went to Nashville and bought a place, a residence for his family to live in. I had somebody to look into all of this, and that's how I found out where my Aunt Joyce lived. In a house on 10th Avenue in Nashville, between 8th Avenue and Division Street. That's where I grew up after my mother died.
Mrs. Ann Cooper.
From the narrative of Mrs. Mary Eloise Stevens Dansby. I remember the time I went to City Hall with my grandmother. I was about 10 years old, and she was going there to pay her taxes. I saw only white people. There were no blacks in City Hall. Everywhere you went in Atlanta, you saw segregation. I remember when the first black police force was created. That was in the 40s, and 8 men were hired. But they were restricted as to where they could patrol and whom they could arrest. Would you believe 4 blacks were lynched in Monroe, Georgia, the year I finished college? And that was in 1946. Jim Crow was hard. Mary Eloise Stevens Dansby.
From the narrative of Mrs. Elizabeth DeGraffin Reed. My sister Helen worked for a white family that came from New York. I don't think they were prejudiced like whites in the South, but I will tell you this. The wife took advantage of us. She said, you know, your mother's beds and dressers are kind of run down. I'm gonna go get her some new things. Well, she took the furniture, and we were just glad to get new furniture, you know. Well, she didn't throw our old furniture away. She had it redone because she knew something we didn't know. The furniture was what you call antiques. Now, that was a shame, wasn't it? Mrs. Elizabeth DeGraffin Reed.
My name is Jenny Mae Weaver. I was named Jenny after my father's mother. Her name was Jane, and I don't ask how we got from Jane to Jenny. I never liked that name. Everybody would say, oh, my grandmother was named Jenny, and I didn't want to be like everybody's grandmother. No, indeed. When I was older, I gave myself my own name, Jacqueline. I remember once that several guys from Morehouse came over to our house and asked for Jacqueline. And when they told my mother where they had met Jacqueline, my mother said, oh, that must be Jenny. Evidently, I was not born because I don't have a birth certificate. My daughter Pauline is trying to find one now for me. And I know it will show that the name I was given at birth was Jenny Marie Weaver, Mrs. Jenny Drake.
From the narrative of Mrs. Anna English. Tuition was only $300 a year, but Daddy couldn't afford to pay for my sister Thelma and me. Since she was closer to graduation than I was, I told Daddy, I'll get a job. And I did. I worked in a white lady's kitchen. The house I worked in was located in the West End area. The area is now all black. But when I worked there, it was an all-white community. I did whatever was asked of me on my job. That work experience made an indelible impression on me. It made me say to myself, I'll not do this again. Mrs. Anna English.
From the narrative of Mrs. Elizabeth Gross. I remember the care my mother took to keep us from being narrow in our thinking. She wanted us to know that there's a big world out there, and as a result, our world included people from different religions, Seventh-day Adventists, and Jehovah's Witnesses. I sang in the choir at our church,
and I even directed the young people's choir. At that time, people used their hands as instruments. They would clap as they sang, and later they would use the piano. One of my favorite songs was Blessed Quietness, Holy Quietness. I can't remember all the words, but it was a beautiful song. Mrs. Elizabeth Gross.
From the narrative of Mrs. Lily Harris. I am a blessed woman. I have 13 grands and about 23 or 24 great-grands and 5 great-greats. You will be surprised to know I always wanted to be a missionary. Yes, isn't that something? I wanted to be a missionary because after I had a family, I just knew I couldn't do that. But people tell me that's what I am because I'm always doing things for people. When I could when I could really get around, I was always trying to help somebody. That was what I wanted to be, a missionary. Isn't that something? Mrs. Lily Harris.
From the narrative of Dr. Carrie Johnson. This is special because she taught my mother in high school. I have no idea how Father's father acquired money and land in Jasper County at a time when most black people in the South were having such a difficult time. We even bought horses in Atlanta on Lee Street. And this was during the 1940s. He and my grandmother, Hattie, had 9 children. And my father was the only one of the children to have a large family. Grandmother Hattie was born during the third year of freedom, and she would talk a little about how hard it was during slavery. But, you know, life was so treacherous. They just didn't want to talk about it. I think that is true of most black families. And that is one of the reasons stories about slavery weren't passed down through the generations. It was just something they just didn't want to talk about. Dr. Carrie Johnson.
From the narrative of Miss Annie Jewel Moore. I remember my grandmother had a friend whose daughter, because of a handicap, was sent to a special school where she learned to sew by hand. The first time she came home from that special school, when I saw all those gorgeous doll clothes she had made, I wanted to learn to sew like that. I was 6 or 7 at the time. And then when I went to vocational high school in Griffin, I made my first dress, and I thought it was perfect. And that's how it all started. At a very early age, I was preparing myself to be a fashion designer. Miss Annie Jewel Moore.